Good day everyone, my name is John Joshua Lapping, currently taking Bachelor of Science Criminology. As now I'm here, I'm gonna be discuss my topic about content and narrative. And now let's proceed. Content. The content of piece of art relates to what is being represented and can aid into determining its core meaning. As I, as you can see in this photo, for me, the content can be simple and certain situation, but in others it is less evident and requires more information. Next is there are four types of content: portraits, landscapes, still lifes, genre arts. Next, portrait. A portrait is a depiction of a person's face and expression in a painting, picture, sculpture, or other creative medium. I For me, the goal of portrait is to convey the person's image, personality, and even mood. Next, landscapes. Landscape painting, often known as landscape art, is the portrayal and art of landscape natural scenery such as mountains, valley, trees, rivers, and forests. These are parts grouped into a coherent position, especially if the main is a wide view. Next is still lifes. A still life is a work of art that depicts largely inanimate subject matter, usually everyday things that are either natural, food, flowers, dead animals, plants, rocks, or shells, or man-made drinking glasses, books, vases, jewelry, coins, pipes, and so on. And the last is genre arts. Scenes or events from ordinary life, such as marketplace, home settings, interiors, parties, and scenes, and street scenes are shown in genre art and a variety of mediums. For me, genre art as realistic, imagine, and, and idealized representation, also known as genre works, genre scenes, or genre perspective, might be realistic imagined. Next is narrative arts. It makes advantage of the visual image capacity to excite people's interest, elicit emotions, and convey common cultural truths and ambitions. For me, narrative art, apart from other forms of art, is its capacity to tell a narrative across culture while also conserving it for futures generations. Next is narrative. Narrative can also be implied or identified in a visual text by advice such as the argument of the iconography or the use of perspective to provide a central focus. Narrative lighting draws attention to particular features in a text and ensures we make sense of image. They use light, particularly structures, and there are three types of narratives: first person, second person, and third person. It serves its own purpose, but before we enjoy some examples of narration, it's important to distinguish between narrative and narrations. Iconography. It in the visual arts, the science of identifying, describing, classifying, and interpreting symbols, motifs, and subject matter. The word can also apply to a work usage of this imagery by the artist. The first iconographical studies published in the 16th century were catalogs of emblems and symbols gathered from antiquity and translate into pictorial language of painters' use. There are seven elements of narrative: plot, setting, atmosphere, characterization, them, point of view, figurative language, and literary device. Next is, as you can see the image shown in figure conveys a distinct story possibility by its use of light. The two women have their eyes closed but seem to be sitting upright in a very brightly lit place. This, along with the title, insists that we see them not as being at rest but as frozen in motion. Um, when conveying the narrative and visual image as that the depict characters making expressive movement, describing what he calls the first obvious appeal, the empathy and image. Excuse me. Um, they are they are commuters are therefore I and therefore are neither dead nor in prayer, which close eyes in both heads and light place might imply, by probably sleeping and most likely on a relatively long trip and using public transport. If you had looked if we had looked at the image is figure, the location public transport would have been confirmed, and the reason the reason for sleeping would have been implied by the very wary expression on the woman and the dozing person behind her. Next, visual text also use figure and techniques to convey stories through conventions known by most people in a society. The use of literary and other allusions, and one approach we see this in, for example, the many paintings, sculptures, stained glass windows, and other illustration that draw heavily on stories from classical myth and the Bible. For me, because the story illustrate in these ways were so widely known until fairly recent times. The story itself could direct the reading of the visual text for instance instance I instance an image automatically evoke the story of Christ and execution. Next, there are questions. The the piece of art relates to what is being represented and can aid in determining its core meaning. A content, B arts, I genre arts, C narrative arts. Second is 2. It's it is a part of group into a coherent composition, especially if the main subject is a wide view, still lifes, portraits, landscapes. 3. The first the first iconographical studies published in the 16th century were catalogs of emblems and symbols gathered from antiquity and translate translate into pictorial language of for painters use. A landscape, B narrative, C iconography. And that's all. Thank you.